Goth, the sound of a beautiful darkness. One of the many evolutions of the sound we now think of as post-punk. The popularity of the goth aesthetic in 2024 can make it easy to forget that goth was first purely a music scene, with bands like Bauhaus, The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, and the Sisters of Mercy, all creating a new sound that led to a whole new scene. This style has been adopted and adapted in new musical ways since then, influencing, for example, the development of industrial music, and leading to a variety of takes on gothic metal over the decades. For my second Halloween episode this year, I'm going to explore 13 current goth bands that I think anyone who enjoys goth music ought to check out. I'm Michael, and this is Eclecticism. To try and pre-answer your questions a little bit about why your favorite bands might not be on this list, I really tried to limit it to bands that haven't been around for more than 11 years from the time that they first formed, not the time that they released something. So that rules out a whole lot of bands. I also tried to focus on some bands from outside the US and outside the UK to give a little bit more diversity, but at the same time, I still am coming from the US. Those are the bands that I know the most, so my own ignorance is going to dictate the list a little bit. If you know of some cool bands, no matter where they're from, please do use the comments below to, share some of those so that other people can discover them too. With that, on to the top 13. 13. Pesadilla Gris. Their first album, Menorah, came out in 2022 and displayed how well the band can make a fun and atmospheric take on Darkwave that makes you want to dance. Then their first EP, Portal, came out in 2023. Although just 4 songs, I feel like you can already hear some progression on this one, with the songs feeling more individually developed, and the production sounding a bit better. But I think both are worth checking out, and I've not heard anyone talking about this band yet, so please give them a listen, and share them if you enjoy what you hear. 12. Black Doldrums. Originally a duo, now a 3-piece, Black Doldrums are a gothic post-punk band from London. They started out with a sound that was much closer to shoegaze, and their feedback-drenched She Divine EP is definitely worth exploring if you enjoy bands like Ride or Curve. But they started fitting more clearly in the goth category with their album Dead Awake from 2022. There are still hints of those earlier shoegazy sounds with plenty of guitar feedback. You can hear some inspirations like the Jesus and Mary Chain and Joy Division. But to me, this is the most fully realized their sound has been yet, and has clearer musical ties to goth. However, the first few tracks from their upcoming album, Limerence, show them embracing this darkness even more. I love the tracks that have been released so far, so I recommend you keep an eye out for this album, which is coming out on October 18th. 11. Caress. Caress is the project of Tara Jane from Los Angeles, California. She's been involved in the LA punk and goth scenes for years, and has been obsessed with music after getting her first guitar at a pawn shop at around the age of 9. Her first band, Blood Candy, was a shoegaze/post-punk project. It seems like the shoegaze to goth pipeline is quite powerful. You can sense her broad range of musical experience in how confident this debut sounds. For me, Night Call is the perfect kind of soundtrack for driving around at night or traveling through a city at night. It just has a sort of introspectiveness to it, but it also has a momentum. Tara Jane's softly delivered vocals manage to be both clear and somewhat haunted sounding at once. That's part of what I love about this album. While there's this reverberation, she didn't feel the need to bury everything in a whole lot of feedback to establish that darkwave mood. And the clarity of the production makes it so songs like The Stranger and Night Call get stuck in my head really easily. Rosegarden Funeral Party. This Texas band is the project of Leah Lane. Since 2018, they've released 3 albums and 3 EPs, which is pretty damn productive, unless you're King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. You can tell from some of the titles of their albums and EPs that there's a progression of a storyline across them. Martyr, At the Stake, In the Wake of the Fire, and From the Ashes being their most recent album. At this point in the story, our character is a phoenix rising from the ashes, apparently on a big-ass motorcycle. While I enjoy all of their albums to one extent or another. I feel like Martyr is the best starting place from a goth perspective. It feels like it's a little bit darker, a little bit more influenced by that kind of sound. So that's probably where I would start for this list, but I do encourage you to explore more of their sounds than just that. Number 9, House of Harm. House of Harm is a Boston trio who formed in 2017. Their sound blends a bit of new wave with goth rock, bringing to mind The Cure around the Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me era. The guitar playing matches the 80s aesthetic of bands like Echo and the Bunnymen, but the songwriting, while fitting with this overall goth aesthetic, does feel unique and has a catchiness to it as well. They've so far released 2 albums, with my favorite being Vicious Pastimes from 2020. As is often the case, this could just be because I've heard it more at this point. It does feel like it has a bit more immediacy for me when it comes to catchy and memorable hooks, like Always and Catch. I'd recommend both albums though. Number 8, Molchat Doma. Formed in 2017, Molchat Doma is from Minsk, Belarus. They self-released their first album that same year, and have made 3 albums since then. I don't really know how it happened at this point, but I know that they started getting a lot of buzz in some of the areas that I roam on the internet. During the pandemic, I started listening to them quite a bit. For some reason, I really thought for quite a while that this was some unearthed older recording that was actually from the 80s, some kind of cool cold wave band that people didn't know about until recently. Turns out it's an active modern band, and I really respect the way that they managed to find a really vintage sound that can pass off as something that's coming from that era, while still feeling like a unique take on it. Despite having a YouTube channel, I'm not that into social media and not at all connected to the world of TikTok, so I was quite stunned to realize that Molchat Doma have had a lot of success due to the platform, and even had their 3rd album, Monument, enter the Billboard Top 100 albums briefly. For a darkwave band from Belarus in 2024, this is kind of weird and also wonderful. Because I'm trying to highlight the differences between these bands, I'd recommend starting with Hitaji, that first album, and working your way towards the present. I think they capture a certain something on that first album in terms of pointing back towards early darkwave that you don't really get from the other bands on this list. But the more recent albums have their own sounds and should definitely be explored as well. 7. Kaelan Mikla. This Icelandic trio formed in Reykjavik back in 2013, and their first performance was at a library poetry contest, where they paired poetry with sung vocals and bass. They won the contest, and this encouraged them to see what else they could do. It turns out they could do quite a bit. Their name translates to Lady of the Cold, which is utterly perfect for an Icelandic goth band. Looking across their albums, they started off a little bit more post-punk and have moved a little more towards sort of an ethereal wave. Both feel fairly goth. But I find it interesting how with their later recordings they managed to blend those 2 fairly different sides of their sound, transitioning fairly seamlessly and making it all feel cohesive. It feels organic and not jarring, which it very easily could from a less skilled band. They can go from reminding me a bit of Dead Can Dance one moment, or Cocteau Twins or something like that, to something that feels more rocking and more post-punk, and are able to weave that together in a way that really works. Kaelan Mikla have released 5 albums so far, the most recent of which is a soundtrack to a 1921 silent film called The Silent Carriage. And if that isn't the most goth-sounding project ever, I don't know what is. Their 3rd album, translated to Under the Cold Northern Lights, this title fits the sound wonderfully. The synths sound icy and the vocals soft and ethereal, with stunning vocal layering on some of the tracks, especially on track 5, which might be my favorite. I find this album to be a good entry point if you want to embrace the ethereal side of their music. However, their 2nd album, translated to Night After Night, has more post-punk influences, so go with what sounds best to you. Number 6, Chain Cult. This is a Greek trio who have all been in a variety of punk, hardcore, and crust punk bands. They formed Chain Cult as a chance to explore a new sound, which moves in a goth and post-punk direction, while still having remnants of their roots in punk. I'd describe it as a highly punk-influenced style of gothic rock, with vocals that are more aggressive, while still having melody. It's a higher octane version of goth rock, and reminds me of a great early English band called The Sound. Chain Cult's first album, Shallow Grave, is still a fairly new discovery for me. I've been listening to it for maybe a year. I feel like it's positioned in a sort of unique spot because there is so much of a buzz around these post-punk bands right now, and you also have a little bit of a resurgence of interest in punk. But I feel like their mix, this like gothy take with some punk elements, isn't really being done by anybody else, and it's a really great combination that I can't get enough of. If you're watching this video right after it came out, Chain Cult just released their second album, Harm Reduction. Obviously, I haven't had a long time to process this new album. As of me recording this, it's been out for 2 days. But my first impression is that it lives up to their first album and doesn't change their sound too drastically. They continue to create fast and energetic goth rock, with a wash of guitar feedback that makes it feel like it could have come out in the 80s. I highly recommend checking out both of these albums. Number 5, Twin Tribes. Okay, so honest question. Why the hell are there so many good Darkwave bands coming from the hottest places on the earth? Why do we have so many coming out of Texas, coming out of Georgia, coming out of Australia? Why aren't you guys outside enjoying yourselves? Twin Tribes is one of the most well-known of these Texas bands, and of the current wave of goth bands overall. This duo formed in 2017, and I'd honestly thought they'd been around longer, considering how long I've been hearing about them. As ubiquitous as they seem, I was surprised they were young enough to make the list. They're 4 albums into their career, all of which sound distinct, but fit within the goth and darkwave sound. Influenced by bands like The Cure and Depeche Mode, along with Latin American rock and punk bands including Soda Stereo and Size. On their most recent albums, Altars and Pendulum, I feel like they've grown more into their own sound, and the production, combined with how catchy some of these songs are, is enough to make me think that it's a prolific band who are steadily getting better at their craft. I would recommend checking out Pendulum, their most recent album, first, and then begin to explore their earlier career. Number 4, The Cold Field. The Cold Field is a duo from Adelaide, Australia. They formed in 2019, after the dissolution of the 3-piece band Black Coral, with 2 of the band members deciding to move on to this new project. Pairing fuzzy, sometimes shoegazy guitars with synths and a drum machine, they craft some of the most cold-sounding of cold wave on this whole list. I think that what really separates this band for me from the rest of the list is the fact that you have these really high levels of distortion and feedback and echo on the voices, on the guitar tones. Then you have these more minimalist synths that are going along with those elements. It creates this sort of density, like you're just moving through this thick fog. And when I'm looking for goth, when I'm looking for some kind of dark wave, that's the kind of feeling I'm looking for, so it's sort of a perfect combination for me. They have a sound that's reflective, dark, and beautiful. Hollows is probably my favorite of their 3 albums so far. All 3 are quite good, but I just love the guitar sounds on this album. The guitars have this great, almost droning level of feedback on tracks like Endless Ending, and I just can't get enough of how they sound. If you enjoy Darkwave, this is one band I think should be much better known than they are. But please, guys, post more photos of your band on the internet. Do some damn promos or something. Number 3, Vision Video. This Athens, Georgia band released their first album in 2021 and have a pretty strong buzz for a goth band that's so new. Lyrically, there's a lot of darkness in this music, naturally for goth, but this darkness is informed by vocalist Dusty Gannon's experience in the army in Afghanistan and by more recent years of his work as a paramedic and firefighter. As far as I can tell, he still balances this work with his work with Vision Video, which has to make for an interesting resume. I'd say the darkness of their lyrics contrasts with the lightness compared to the other bands of their music. You can actually hear a lot of, I would say, jangle pop in their sound. I hear some elements of the Chameleons, the Smiths, the Cure. I feel like the post-punk knob is kind of turned down a bit compared to these other bands, and they've kind of cranked up the jangle pop a little bit. A little more focused maybe on melody as well. Their first album, Inked in Red, is a very fun album full of songs with good hooks that don't do a whole lot to reinvent goth, but do provide a really engaging and fun hybrid of different 80s styles. Songs like In My Side and Inked in Red are infectious and hard to get out of your head. Their follow-up album, Haunted Hours, seems a bit more somber to me and a bit darker, making it stand out slightly less, maybe, from the rest of this list than Inked in Red. I do ultimately recommend hearing them both, but I would start with the debut. So, we're down to the final two, the top 2 spots. It's getting so exciting, isn't it? Does that make this a good time for a quick aside to my subscribers? Thank you so much for helping me reach 1,000 subscribers way faster than I would have imagined I ever really could have. I was expecting to see the kind of numbers I'm seeing now maybe after a year, maybe after a couple years of doing this. So the fact that there are already people who are really enjoying my videos means a lot to me, and it's making me really excited to keep going. And as a thank you for helping me to hit a goal that really was kind of a pipe dream just a matter of weeks ago, I'd like to do a topic suggested by you. Yes, you specifically. I'd like to do a subscriber suggested topic. Obviously music, preferably not classical, because I know jack shit about that. If you have an idea you think would make a cool video for this channel, it could be talking about bands from right now, it could be talking about bands from the past, a particular genre, a particular scene. If you have an idea that you think would be cool to see covered on the Eclecticism channel, please put it down below in the comments section. If you see an idea there you really like, give it a like, and I will be looking through those. It's not really a democracy. I am a tyrant. I'll go through the topics. I'll pick something that I feel like I could actually do some kind of justice to, even if it does involve some research. I will plan that for sometime in November. Okay, that's it. Back to the list. Number 2, Creeper. Creeper is a band from Southampton, England. They formed in 2014, with members coming from Southampton's hardcore and post-hardcore scenes. They've steadily been gaining attention since, thanks to their infectious blend of goth, glam, and a certain theatricality, I guess, that really sets them apart from any other modern band I can think of. Each album, and even EP, has had an accompanying storyline and a new look from the band. Band frontman Will Gould sees this band as both a musical expression and a way to express his love of storytelling. Since there's an element of emo to their sound as well, they do make me think a bit of My Chemical Romance, another bombastic band that like to weave storytelling throughout their music. But as far as inspirations go, Gould himself has mentioned AFI, Alkaline Trio, David Bowie, and a variety of goth bands like Sisters of Mercy and The Cult. Their third album, Sanguivore, feels the most goth-leaning to me. It also has some really strong songs on it, like Cry to Heaven, Love You More Than Death, a range that goes from ballads to things that feel more like rocking glam goth things. The album really delivers this glitzy, gory goth in this real camped up and incredibly fun way, really. This album captures the drama of Jim Steinman, the energy of My Chemical Romance, and the darkness of the Sisters of Mercy, a combination that feels less gloomy or serious than anything else on this list. But what is serious is how good their songs are, and how unique this band is. This album was one of my favorites from 2023 out of any music genre, so seriously, check it out. And now, number 1, Boy Harsher.
Самая переоцененная музыкальная группа.
Boy Harsher.
Oh, shut up, guys. Boy Harsher is a two-piece Darkwave band from Savannah, Georgia, who formed in 2013. Jay Matthews on vocals, and Augustus Miller on everything else. They met in film school, and their first project, Teen Dreams, was a combination of Miller's synth work and Matthews' spoken word. As she got more confident with singing, she adopted an incredibly recognizable delivery style that feels sensual and haunted, ominous, yet very expressive for how soft the delivery is. These vocals ride over this wonderful bed of these minimalist synths and textures. It feels very influenced by 80s horror soundtracks, things you might hear by John Carpenter, and also by other 80s synthwave in general. The combination creates something that feels like you could hear it blaring through speakers at a goth club. You could also have a really good experience listening to it in good headphones, just having a sort of introspective moment to yourself. They've been highly productive, and I'm torn about what my favorite album is, but I'll go with the first one I heard, since it definitely hooked me and I think it's the most immediately accessible. The Runner, which is a soundtrack for their own horror movie, is the most varied project so far. It has my favorite of their album openers yet, called Tower, a track that starts off with slow synths and hushed vocals, but then grows into something much more aggressive as it reaches its conclusion. You have two of the most upbeat and catchy songs yet, with Autonomy and Machina, and then you have Give Me a Reason, which should absolutely be a hit that people talk about. I've been pretty obsessed with this band since I first discovered them after seeing The Runner and just being totally moved by the music that I was hearing in the background, so much that I pretty much right away went and started listening to their whole catalog. I'd say they're one of the bands that got me exploring the most recent waves of goth, and it just got me reinvigorated with that whole style of music. And I hope that somewhere on this list you found some new bands you've never heard of before, somebody who's going to get you excited about it too. If I missed out on any of your favorites, please do talk about them below in the comments, and in the comments feel free to talk about some older bands too, because there's a long, great history to goth music. And since this has come up a couple times, if you do have your own goth band and you want to talk about your new singles or anything that you've put out, please do. Thanks for watching, and again, if you're a subscriber and you have an idea you think would be fun to see me do a video on in November, scroll down to the comments and tell me about it. Thanks for watching.